Whew, that was a long patch that we just finished up. What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. I'm excited to let you know that patch 11.15 is finally done, and it's time to move forward with patch 11.16. I'm Kangas, and in this video, I'm providing you with all the changes for patch 11.16, as well as tier lists curated by our high elo analysts. So make sure to hit that sub button, and let's get right into it. The first piece of new content that we got to go over is the skins. Now, I'm a big fan of this aesthetic, so I think that they're really cool, and they gave champions a much darker look than we're used to. We got, of course, Coven Ahri, Ashe, Cassiopeia, Evelynn, and even a Prestige edition for LeBlanc added to the shop this patch. Two other skins that I'm really hyped for are Old God Malphite and Warwick. So give these skins a look, especially if you consider a more solemn or serious cosmetic tone. Moving forward though, let's get into the balance changes. Kicking off systems, we have a nerf to Dark Seal. If you're wondering if this item was OP, then yes, it was. And even for those of you that already knew it was, I still gotta tell you why. You probably lived through it firsthand, but the game is pretty darn snowbally right now. You pick up a lead, and in most cases, you steamroll through the enemy team. But as we all know, more often than not, it's the other team's mid laner that's getting fed and then murdering you and your teammates over and over again. Either way, the point I'm trying to get across is that when ahead, it's pretty easy to max out Dark Seal's stat count. Dark Seal provides far too much value for what it was. At its peak, it provided 65 AP for the tiny cost of 350 gold. That is just way too much value, way more than a needlessly large rod. So as a result, the AP per stack is down from 5 to 4, and you'll also lose one more stack on death. This is a significant nerf, as each point of AP is worth just below 22 gold. It's losing more than half its own cost at maximum stacks, so do not take this nerf lightly. And the loss of an extra stack also makes deaths that much more punishing. To put it simply, the gold value of the item at max stacks is down from around 1500 to 1300. So still pretty good, but no longer nearly as busted. But with that nerf out of the way, let's talk about a buff for Redemption. Redemption was a creative and impactful purchase on release. That was a long time ago though, and the game is vastly different now, featuring a ton of burst damage as well as a weaker locket shield. Redemption was ridiculously powerful when you could shield allies for 1000 extra health, but now the carries are more commonly blown up in less than a second, the value of Redemption is lower than before. It has a 2.5 second channel time, so it's not surprising that lots of players aren't even able to effectively use it. To make the item more rewarding, the heal was increased from 180 to 360 to the new 200 to 400, and the cooldown was reduced from 120 seconds to 90 seconds. It's much more rewarding now, and it might not be as far-fetched of an idea to use it outside of a team fight for some easy sustain. Overall, I agree with this buff and don't think the item will be broken even after it. But on the topic of supports, if you want to get good at being one, make sure to check out ProGuides.com. We got two newer courses by support pros Aftermoo and Core JJ, as well as a ton of coaches that can help you improve at any champion or any role. But now moving into the lanes themselves, we'll start off with the top lane changes this patch, addressing some of the more prominent and overpowered picks, as well as our giant tree friend. First up is Fiora. Although she isn't as popular as some other champions, she's doing pretty well at the moment. Fighters are much more popular than before, and nobody loves an aggressive 1v1 fight more than this duelist. Hullbreaker has also contributed to her rise to power, and Riot has decided to nerf her before things get too out of hand. Her E's cooldown was reduced from 11 to 5 to 11 to 7 seconds. This hits her late game, and she'll not only take turrets slower than before, but she'll also be less of a threat in 1v1s. Overall, this nerf might not take a huge hit on Fiora's win rates because it will take longer in a game to actually feel the effects. What's important is finding those early leads in the first place, so we'll leave Fiora in the S tier for now. Tahm Kench skyrocketed last patch and took the spot as the third most popular pick in high elo. His ban rate also hit an uncharacteristic high of 28%. Riot has decided to act quickly this time, and he's already up on the nerf block. His passive damage is down from 12 to 60 to 8 to 60, and the Q healing from 15 to 35 to 10 to 30. This nerf definitely hurts Tahm Kench's early game, but he'll still scale pretty much as well as before. Although weaker than earlier, we expect Tahm Kench to remain OP. It's another one of those nerfs where the champion goes from very broken to slightly less broken. Don't write these nerfs off though. If you found yourself taking fights to the last hit and barely losing, scales may start to tip this patch. And finally, we got some love for Maokai. If you're scared of those devastating saplings, don't worry because this is strictly a tank Maokai buff. His passive healing is up from 5 to 13% to 7 to 15%. His ease damage is down from 25 to 125 to 20 to 120, and the AP ratio also went down from 0.8% per 100 AP to 0.7%. I think this change is pretty clear. AP support Maokai takes a hit, while tank top lane Maokai has more sustain to work with than before. Now, depending on how often you're able to utilize your passive in a late game fight, this buff could honestly make a massive difference. And during laning phase, there's no doubt that the extra sustain will add up. We're still leaving Maokai in the A tier in spite of this buff, but we're keeping a close eye on him. And although we didn't make adjustments off these changes, we do have 3 to talk about for the top lane. First, Sylas is down to the A tier. The aftermath of his last nerf is apparent, and the loss of sustain has definitely left him feeling much weaker in one of the more trade-heavy lanes. Still good, especially against specific team comps, but Sylas struggles to compete against the more dominant picks, especially because a lot of them don't have the best ultimates for him to steal. Akshan has also been added to the C tier. Yep, surprisingly, people are also playing him in the top lane. He is a solo lane marksman, so it was bound to happen, but his top lane performance isn't very impressive even though it's still early on. So this is a soft add to the C tier, it's tentative, it might change. Lee Sin is also down to the C tier this patch following a nerf that we'll talk about in a second. Our OP picks for the top lane this patch are Tahm Kench, Camille, and Aurelia, followed up by Riven, Mordekaiser, Fiora, Jax, Malphite, Gwen, Wukong, Urgot, Shen, Mundo, and Set in the S tier. Moving forward, let's check out the jungle. The jungle has plenty of changes this patch, and some of them are really well needed in there, so I'm sort of happy. Diana is up first, as her ability to flex into the jungle as well as the mid lane gives her some hidden power as a pick. This patch, her passive monster damage is down from 300% to 250%. With a slower clear time, Diana jungle is obviously weaker than before, and mid lane Diana can't farm or counter jungle camps away as quickly as before. So we're moving her down to the A tier after this change. Now, a nerf most players have been anticipating is to our boy Lee Sin. His W's Omni Vamp was lowered from 10 to 30% to 5 to 25%. Especially early on when you only want 1 point in W, this is a massive loss. 5% may not seem like a lot, but another way to look at it is that Lee Sin's early sustain has been cut in half. This not only makes Lee Sin riskier as a jungler, but also noticeably weaker in solo lanes. It's a tough call, but we're moving Lee Sin down from the OP tier into the S tier after this change. Xin Zhao is next, but his nerf is as straightforward as his gameplay. His base AD was reduced from 66 to 63. He clears the jungle slower, and he deals less damage in combat. It's a small nerf, so we'll leave him at the OP tier, but we do expect his win rate to drop slightly. Next up, we got another set of buffs to Jarvan, and this time Riot is going a little wild. Lethality Jarvan returns on patch 11.16, or at least I want to believe that it will. His passive damage is up from 8 to 10% current health, and his ultimate's AD ratio was increased immensely from 150% to 180%. You definitely need to watch out, because even Bruiser Jarvan with Conqueror can take advantage of this buff. Whether players choose to build more damage or continue with a more traditional build, Jarvan's going to deal some nice damage, so he's up to the A tier this patch. Next up is a huge buff for Nunu. His base movement speed is going up from 340 to 345, but more importantly, his ease AP ratio from 54% to 90%. Even if you don't build much AP on Nunu, the movement speed alone will be nice. But we still might see players throw some AP here and there, or we might even see mid lane Nunu make a great comeback. We'll leave him in the A tier for now, but plan on checking in on him in the future. Our analysts really think he might emerge in the mid lane, so maybe he'll end up there next video. Finally, Shaker received a revert on his Q changes last patch. We should have moved him down prior, but the end result is the same and he's staying in the S tier. So that covers the jungle changes. In our OP tier, we have 2 champions in Xin Zhao and Viego. And a quick note, with these nerfs in place, Viego is actually bound to come out stronger. Following up in the S tier are Elise, Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, Zac, Kindred, Kayn, Kha'Zix, Nocturne, Shaco, and Lee Sin. Next up, we have mid laners. While some crucial changes have been made, mid lane has far fewer changes overall. And up first, we have Vladimir. Remember last time he got buffed? Absolutely broken, and then nerfed immediately. But this time the buff is more subtle and focuses on his late game scaling specifically. Basically, if you let Vladimir get there, you deserve to take the beating anyway. Each point of AP now grants more HP. The conversion is up from 1.4 to 1.6. Also, he'll gain a point of AP for every 30 bonus health, 10 less than before. So in other words, overall, he just gains more AP from bonus health than before. Vladimir's late game is going to hit even harder, and you definitely want to make sure to build Grievous Wounds or just find a counter pick for him. While it's not as big of a buff as the Q buff that he received in the past, it's still a nice change for Vladimir enthusiasts out there on the Rift. Now before we continue with mid laners, it's time for our question of the day. How much do you value counter picking an opponent? As a support main who primarily plays Bard, I find that it doesn't matter that much for me, because in the 2v2, Bard's really flexible and you can play him aggressively or defensively. But if you're a solo laner or a jungler, that answer can be very different. So let me know your answer in the comments down below. Moving forward, we have Ziggs, who is basically just a bot laner now, but we'll still put him here since the bot lane is coming up next anyway. This patch, he's received a revert on his mana, but a different nerf to compensate. His base mana is up from 420 to 480, but his E was nerfed. The damage was reduced from 40 to 180 to 30 to 190, while the slow is down from 30 to 50 to 10 to 50. Although the damage will go up in the mid to late game, the loss of 20% slow early on is pretty huge. Trading that much utility for 10 more damage is overall a net loss in power. Trust me. The biggest reason is that it makes landing any follow-up abilities much harder than before. Luckily, he scales and ends up slightly stronger than before if he makes it to that point of the game, so we'll leave Ziggs' placement untouched this patch. We moved Heimerdinger up to the S tier this patch too, but believe he might get moved down as a result of the nerf to Darksteel. So make sure to sub so that you know when we drop our mid-page update for our tier lists. Kennen was also added to the A tier as well, as he's popping off in the mid lane, but because of a low play rate, we're not ready to take his 53% win rate at face value just yet, but we'll continue to keep an eye on his performance. Now for Akshan's placement, we've placed him in the B tier. His scoundrel mechanic is pretty busted, I won't deny it. However, his other numbers have been tuned accordingly, and his win rate remains rather low. I think there's definitely plenty of room for growth, and his current 46% win rate isn't an accurate depiction of his strength right now. But I do want to note, he's got a pretty big issue with wave clear right now. Once he levels up, there's no issue, but early on in the game, it can be a struggle because of the significantly reduced damage on his Q to non-champions. So our OP picks for the mid lane are Zed and Katarina. Following them in the S tier is Sylas, Talon, Annie, Fizz, Kiana, Diana, Ahri, Yone, LeBlanc, Kassadin, Anivia, Vladimir, Yasuo, Malzahar, Aurelia, and Heimerdinger. Whew, there's a lot of mid lane champs in this game. Next up, we got the bot lane. First up, Jhin was buffed this patch. His W's damage is up from 50 to 190 to 60 to 200. In addition, his ultimate's minimum AD ratio is going up from 20% to 25%. More damage is always fantastic for marksmen, and with this buff, Jhin should be able to more effectively bully out his lane opponents. So we'll leave him in the S tier this patch. Sivir also received a solid buff because she was falling a bit behind in the meta due to being outscaled by lots of other marksmen. The utility that she brings just isn't enough for her to keep up. So to help her acclimate, the W scaling has been increased from 30 to 70% to 30 to 90%. It's a big late game buff, especially in clumped up fights in the jungle. However, we still think she'll just remain a B tier pick. We placed Akshan in the C tier. He really needs those levels, especially because he lacks wave clear without them. Also, Akshan's W and E are good abilities, but less applicable in 2v2 scenarios. Choosing to stealth and leaving support to 1v2 isn't the most pleasant experience for them, and plenty of other marksmen have all three of their basic abilities geared towards direct combat. And one last change is that Aphelios is up to the A tier. His last buffs were pretty big, and he's gradually beginning to pop off. He's climbed in both win rate and play rate. His progression is incredible, and he's now the 9th most popular marksman in high elo, a huge improvement from his shaky start this season. So our OP picks for the bot lane are Samira, Ezreal, and Ziggs. In the S tier, we got Jinx, Kai'Sa, Ashe, Vayne, Jhin, Tristana, Draven, and Kog'Maw. And finally, let's move to my main role, supports. Beginning with Lulu, her W's cooldown was increased by a second from 50 to 11 to 16 to 12. In addition, her ultimate's cooldown is up from 110 to 80 to 120 to 80. These are moderate nerfs, and support players that don't play her are probably rejoicing. And even non-support players are, because she provides that much utility. Her early game is slightly weaker than before, and there's also a bigger window to punish her ultimate's long cooldown. But in spite of this, we'd still think Lulu's OP. Next up, we have Karma. Her passive no longer reduces monsters' cooldown off of basic attacks. Instead, abilities now reduce its cooldown by 5 seconds at all levels. Next, her Q's base damage is down from 90 to 270 to 70 to 270. The cooldown was also changed from 8 to 6 seconds to 9 to 5 seconds, and the mana cost is going down from 55 to 45. And also Soulflare's initial damage is up from 25 to 175 to 40 to 220. In return for the Q buffs, her E's utility is also taking a hit. Inspired's base shield has been increased from 80 to 240 to 80 to 260, but the bonus movement speed was lowered from 40% to 60% to a flat 40%. Finally, the bonus movement speed for Mantra E has also been lowered. Allies will only receive 30% of the bonus movement speed from the ability instead of the full effect. This is a major hit to the utility that Karma can provide, but players that land Qs in fights more frequently will go rewarded with more Mantra casts. More damage in place of utility could go either way, so we'll leave her in the A tier. Finally, we have the Sona rework. These changes solidify Sona as a godlike late-game support. Similar to champions like Vhagar and Nasus, Sona wants to farm stacks and play for late-game fights. The biggest change is to her passive. It now has a new passive called Accelerando. Her basic attacks provide a permanent stack of Accelerando, providing 0.5 ability haste for non-ultimate abilities. At 60 non-ultimate ability haste, it'll max out, and any further stacks will instead reduce her ultimate's current cooldown by 1.5 seconds. In the late game, this means that Sona can potentially use her ultimate multiple times in a fight. The longer the fight, the better, as this gives her plenty of opportunities to throw those attacks out. Especially against tanks, this is a huge buff, since Sona can pretty much safely hit them without fear of death. In theory, at least. Next, her Q's mana cost is down from 75 to 95 to 50 to 70. The mana refund was removed, however, so hitting enemy champions with Q will now grant a stack of Accelerando. Her W's mana cost was reduced from 105 to 125 to 80 to 100. But once again, the mana refund was removed, but she gains a stack of her passive when healing an injured ally or blocking at least 25 to 125 damage with the shield. Her E's mana cost is also down from 90 to 65, but of course the mana refund removed, but this ability does not grant Accelerando. Interesting to note. Finally, her ultimate no longer reduces her basic abilities cooldowns. That's on her passive now. Also, her ultimate now hits champions as well as monsters and minions, which is a small buff, but it's kinda nice. As long as you participate in combat, you'll eventually cap out with shorter ability cooldowns and the potential to ult more than once in a fight. Now, I expect her to be popular this patch as players experiment with her rework. For now, we'll still leave her in the A tier. Blitzcrank is moving up to the OP tier this patch, as his win rates have been climbing since his buff and have peaked at 52% in high elo last patch. With a solid play rate to back it up, the power of a single hook is incredible. And the fact that Blitzcrank deals more damage and is tankier than before also makes it easier to win lane as well. So our OP picks are Lulu, Leona, and Blitzcrank, followed up by Thresh, Morgana, Nautilus, Maokai, Zyra, Senna, and Yuumi in the S tier. And that'll wrap up our patch rundown for patch 11.16. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and also check out the description where there's a link to join our Discord. It'd be awesome to have you in the fam. That's it for today, so best of luck on the grind, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.